Before war had even been declared in August 1914, a crisis hit the City of London. Crowds gathered, fearful of what might happen to their investments. Queues built up at the Bank of England, with people desperate to change their paper money into gold. For the first time since then, 100 years on, the Bank of England has released archives from that period. I was given exclusive access to the vaults to take a look at papers covering a little-told story from the early days of World War I. This extraordinary book shows transactions between commercial banks and the Bank of England, where the banks handed in their IOUs, known as bonds, in exchange for cash. Now, in a normal week, even in early July 1914, there wasn't always a lot of business. In fact, some days, nil recorded. But look at July the 31st, 1914, when fears of impending war were really gripping the city. A huge number of deals going through as banks scrambled to get cash out of the Bank of England in exchange for their bonds. In fact, that day, a total of nearly £11 million was withdrawn. A lot of money in those days. The bank's official interest rate was more than doubled to 8% and then 10%. Commercial banks and the stock exchange closed down for several days.
In the week before Britain went to war, all the London financial markets collapsed. It was the most serious systemic financial crisis that has ever overtaken Britain, or indeed the world. There was something like 50 countries had stock exchange crashes and runs on banks in that last week of July.
Intervention by the authorities propped up the markets, but the next challenge was raising money to pay for the war effort. So-called tank banks were used to help persuade people to buy war bonds, in other words, lend money to the government. I have here a ledger recording the different people who bought the war bonds, and it makes absolutely fascinating reading. In the rather quaint language of the day, it records that a gent and a married woman bought the bonds, so too an upholsterer and a farmer. Examples of the range of people who spent money on these bonds. The Bank of England's had to tackle many crises since then, including the events of 2008. The former Governor Lord King said at the time, the only one as severe was the financial upheaval of August 1914. Hugh Pym, BBC News.